something better now.
Shdwbxers, welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Christian Fairfax at Flying Frog Academy in Rohnert Park. That's where we are, Rohnert Park.
We're in Rohnert Park.
And what's Flying Frog all about?
Well, we're Sonoma County's first and only parkour gym. So we teach people how to move in their environment, primarily when that environment involves obstacles. If you want to get around on flat ground, running's probably the fastest way, right? Or like a vehicle's a good idea. When there's walls, trees, rocks, railings, stuff, the urban environment or the natural environment in your way, that's when parkour training comes in. So our gym has bars, walls, structures, mostly geared towards the urban environment, but the techniques are adaptable for the natural environment too.
Nice. Just for people who don't know, where does parkour come from, or what's the sort of a brief history?
Yeah, so parkour originates in France. The history of parkour is a little confusing and fuzzy because the way I understand it, basically there's a group of young men in France who all kind of started training together, and just it started with games and challenging each other, and it starts with tag and jumping and climbing, and it's like, oh, can you climb to that thing? Oh, can you jump across this gap?
You're good.
And it progresses, and they challenged each other and pushed each other and developed techniques. But the kind of fundamental ideas were to kind of get stronger, get more capable, be able to escape or reach. Get somewhere regardless of the obstacles, or if something is chasing you, or if you need to get away, being able to put something in between you and that thing. So there's that kind of we used to joke, it's a joke, but it's also serious. It's the French martial art of running away. But more than that, I think it's a very playful activity that encourages community, working on things together, challenging each other, not necessarily in a competitive way, but more in somebody comes up with a new thing and everyone goes, oh, I want to see if I can do that. Or, oh, I would have never thought to use the wall in that way. And then we all kind of try it. And that's how that's how the sport grows.
Sounds like kind of parkour was, the French gave it a name. Parkour was also something that maybe has existed for since humans were humans running around.
Right.
And to kind of give it structure is what maybe the French did to.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the internet is what shared that, and now it's grown a lot more. So parkour was spread a little bit before YouTube, but it didn't get very far. And obviously videos are what really can show people what parkour is. You can describe it all you want, but until you see it, it's
Was YouTube your introduction to it?
YouTube was my introduction to parkour. That was in 2008 when I started. And yeah, when I saw it, it was I had a gymnastics background, but it kind of blew me away. It was the stuff that was different from gymnastics that blew my mind. I was like, oh, how are they jumping on those tiny little things? And then you'd see them doing these wall runs with multiple steps and rebounding off and up things, and you were like, how does the physics work for that? I get it because it's happening, but at the same time, it's very cool. It's very ninja,
Totally.
I loved Jackie Chan.
Yep.
Everyone who did parkour does parkour.
Right. Tony Jaa. Did you see that movie after finding parkour and see Tony Jaa do that scene? Yeah.
Yep. Saw that after.
Yeah, that really inspired me for sure, seeing that movie. And yeah. I used to run a lot. Not everybody who's into parkour is super into running. I've
Yeah,
come to realize also.
Yeah, it's funny. So I would say most people who do parkour don't train it like a martial art, in that their goal isn't necessarily to be the most prepared for an emergency scenario.
Uh-huh.
Their goal is to get fit, have fun, move in their environment, all that stuff. And then what translates well and gets views on video is big explosive movements. And so parkour athletes are often built more like sprinters, because if you are really explosive and built for that burst, then you can do a really big impressive jump or whatever. That said, there are people in the community who are more endurance athletes, or really everyone's trying to be neutral, you know, be able to play in both areas so that you can do a decent sized jump, but also you don't get winded right away.
Right. Is parkour in the X Games yet?
Parkour is not in the X Games.
In the X Games. There's a Red Bull that does competitions, right? Red
Bull hosts a parkour competition every year. They took a break for a year, but they're back doing it now. But more so, we host our own competitions. So there's it's kind of a grassroots movement.
You do them here at Flying Frog?
We have. We just had one in February. It was a youth competition. And that's pretty new for us. This was our second one, but we teamed up with some other gyms. That's another really cool thing, because parkour gyms are pretty new. We've been around for 5 years. We teamed up with the other parkour gyms in the Bay Area. There's one in Concord and there's one in San Jose. And, we all the owners of the gyms we've all been doing parkour a similar amount of time. We've all been doing it 8 to 12 years. And so we're like the experienced community leaders. And so we all already know each other and we're all friends with each other and we've trained together. And so there's not any weird stigma or difference. I mean, there's obviously difference between the gyms and we all have our own little individual culture, but we're all still, or at least I'm still trying to be a part of the larger parkour community. Because I think that parkour community aspect is super important. And
does the competition work on a point system judging? And
so because parkour competitions are grassroots and people just kind of start their own, there's different formats, but there's one format that a lot of people have really taken to, that is the NAPC style. So that's the North American Parkour Championships. It's in Vancouver every year. They now have, it started out just with this gym in Vancouver hosting a big competition years ago. And now they have qualifying competitions all over the United States. And I think there's one qualifier in Canada. And then everyone goes up and competes. And the format is there's 3 categories. There's speed, which is kind of the go-to martial arts version of parkour. If you want to know what the fastest way to get from point A to point B is, you're a speed athlete.
These guys are going to show you.
Yeah, with crazy obstacles in your path.
Right.
It's the most technical, complex, up and down with tiny ledges, and it's super incredible to watch. And the cool thing about speed is that each athlete creates their own path. They have a given course, but they get to choose how they navigate that course as long as they stay within the guidelines. So if you can play to your own strengths, and so, or if you're creative and you have a really good eye for the fastest line, you might have 10 guys go before you, and then you go and you do something different, and everybody after you is like,
that's the better
do I
way,
need to
maybe.
do it that way? I didn't practice it that way.
Right. I haven't been thinking about it this whole time. Right?
And so that's very cool.
Yeah.
And then there's skill, which is similar to how most people train parkour, where there's just a specific challenge and then you have to kind of accomplish that challenge. Different formats are you might have limited attempts, or you might get more points if you complete it on your first attempt. Some of them, it's just a bunch of skill challenges that are really diverse, and you see how many you can accomplish.
Kind of like Ninja Warrior. Or like
So Ninja Warrior is a set obstacle course using where they're designing
it's very more
bizarre
specific.
obstacles that are intended to make a person have trouble. The skill challenges are using environmental factors and require specific movements. So in the speed challenge, no specific movements are required. It's just you have to go in between these two cones, pass through this area, right? In a skill challenge, it's okay. You have to vault this, step off this, swing here, and land here, and then the next skill challenge is like involves a wall run and some other stuff. And so basically it requires a very well-rounded parkour athlete. You have to know how to do all of the techniques in a really advanced way, because at the high level competitions, the skill challenges they're big, they're technical, they're really tricky. And it's cool because one of the things that you do in parkour when you go out is you come up with what to do. You're like, what can I do with these things? And so it's kind of fun for parkour athletes to go to a skill competition, because they can take all that thinking out of it, and they can somebody just goes, hey, try this. Hey, try this. And you're like, oh, cool. I just get to come and try things. I get to come and be tested. And I test my skills and my progress, and then
it's an honest way to look at yourself.
Exactly. And so it tests a different thing, and it tests kind of how well-rounded you are. And
speaking of tests, let's just make sure.
Yeah, good idea.
All things are happening. Yeah, we're doing good.
Cool. But yeah, it tests. It gives you an idea if you miss a skill challenge, but you did well at other ones. You might be like, oh, this is an area that I need to work on.
Right.
And then the last category is style. So it's skill, speed, and style. And style is more similar to, I would say it's similar to like a snowboard or like skateboarding, like freestyle competition, or like a street skate competition, where they have an area this area is in play, and you do tricks in there. But in a parkour style competition, it's usually designed in a often compact, but it doesn't have to be, but a well-connected run is the goal. So they're trying to do their highest level tricks that they can land well and connect into other things.
Can you explain a well-connected run for
So if you have seen like a gymnastics routine, they do a floor pass. So they do tumbling. All those tricks are well connected, and then they stop. They take a deep breath. They swing their arms around. They do a little dance move, and then they do the next one, and they stop. They do a thing, and then they do the next one. In a parkour or free running style competition, there's no pauses. So your goal is to create a series of movements that flows. And so sometimes you'll have courses that involve a lot of level changes. And so an athlete might start at the top so that they have kind of gravity on their side, and they'll do flips and acrobatics down. But a lot of it is not just how hard is the trick, but how did you incorporate the obstacles? Is it interesting to watch? Is it something that maybe isn't the most obvious choice? Because just doing a really hard flip off of like a plain ledge, that's really similar to tricking or gymnastics, just with a raised surface. And so that is a part of it, but
what's next?
Where'd
it come from and where's it going?
Yeah. And what the area that it's like moving towards is, instead of just doing this hard trick off an obstacle and landing on flat ground, you're flipping across a gap and landing on something really small, or you're incorporating this strange ledge with a step to make your flip unique. You might do a move in a style run that is specific to that spot that you have never done before, but with the setup you thought, well, I can do this move, and I wonder if I could use this specific obstacle and do this move in a new way. So that's one of the most kind of exciting ones to watch, because people are trying things that they haven't done before. And not just things they haven't done before, but they're trying like difficult acrobatics, at least in spots that they haven't done it before.
Yeah.
And it's not like they just huck it. They get practice time, and usually the practice time involves mats. But then during the actual competition, there's usually no mats. It's like, and the competitions are usually in gyms, at least NAPC is, and so it's like rubber flooring, and the obstacles are usually wooden and metal bars, and so, people are doing flips 8 feet up on railings, and then like hopping out into swings and
Right.
doing really incredible things. At the last NAPC, a guy did a double side flip, so 2 flips off of this like huge box and landed on a wall that's like this wide, and it was the first person ever to do that, and he executed it really well.
Right.
He actually tried it 3 times, so that they at NAPC they have a category called Big Trick, and you have to qualify into it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems totally X Games prepared already. Like it reminds me so much of that skateboard culture.
Yeah.
When X Games first came out.
Yeah.
Where you had like downhill,
Yep.
like and all,
And that's
all kinds of
kind of the idea is that
Yeah.
with like snowboarding and with these different things, there's it's not just I'm a snowboarder.
Yeah. What do you do?
It's
Multifaceted.
there are areas you can specialize. I haven't competed much, but I do areas of all 3. Like occasionally I'll do speed. I think I'm probably best at skill. I've always been a relatively well-rounded. Like I haven't had one area that I'm like crazy good, but I've been interested in all of it. So I've always done the flips. I've always done the jumps, and I've always tried to do them quickly if I can.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Can you speak on safety? Parkour, skateboarding, martial arts.
Oh,
all these things we were talking about a little
topic.
bit before about concussions. We were talking about traumatic sports, right? And I always admired the kind of methodology that parkour uses to keep yourself safe.
Yep.
And I think it'd be cool to hear you.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. Parkour, I have found to be a little bit unique in regards to safety because it involves the environment, which is unchanging. The environment is harsh. It is concrete with sharp ledges. People, a lot of parkour practitioners will still train when it's wet out. They're not going to be doing the same things, but it doesn't mean that you can't go out and get better and learn. And so the like fundamental idea is preparedness. So you train reactions to be appropriate to different situations. So we have a series of kind of prepared reactive movements for landings, and we have a whole series of prepared reactive movements for falling. And so when you're jumping at a ledge, you might have a goal, which is to land perfectly, both feet at the same time on the ledge, and you land and you don't even move. That's your like plan A. I'm going to do a perfect one. But humans aren't perfect, and no matter how much you've trained, things can go wrong. And so there's like a whole spider web of possibilities. And the landing continuum is what we call it. Connects to the falling continuum. So it goes from like landing perfectly to landing and taking a step to landing and hopping forward or landing and hopping backward. There's techniques to catch yourself so that you don't just slam into the wall. It's about kind of getting your feet out in front of you, getting the right posture so that you can catch the corner of the wall or the side of the wall or the edge of a rail. And then, when those things fail, that's when it goes into the falling continuum, which includes rolling, includes break falls, really similar to martial arts, and kind of a whole spectrum. And because parkour is so complex and the environment can be so complex because, the things that we're using, in a gym, the things that we're using are designed for parkour, but outside, the things that we're using are just whatever's there. And so it could be any combination of things. There could be corners, there could be rails, there could be weird shapes, there could be animals. I don't do parkour on animals. Yeah, you have to be prepared to react to the environment. And so preparedness is the most important part. That also means that you check things before you go. So you're checking your surfaces, you're checking for stability, you're looking out for hazards. You know, each spot that you do something is slightly different, so you have to adapt to the spot and adapt your movement to the new things there, whatever is unique about that area.
What about learning a new skill or learning something that you currently are not capable of doing?
Right.
Like what are the, how do you, what are your philosophies on that, and how do you prepare somebody who's maybe never done anything to, like we were talking about our friend Rich, who's been coming and doing your Learn to Flips class, and he's an older gentleman like me, maybe a little bit older, Papa and all that, and like seeing him being here working every week for a long time, and
multiple times a week,
sticking back tucks, standing back tucks.
He's got
a monster.
The most beautiful flat ground backflip really that he learned as an adult who had no background.
Walk us through the risks, and then how to manage risk management moving into a skill like that.
I would say it's a little different depending on a few factors. If you want to learn flips, for example, your number one choice is, if you have access to a gym, that's your best option. There are ways that you can learn flips outside. It's a little more dangerous. It's a little tricky. You have to be really patient with yourself, and you have to choose your environment appropriately for like your learning curve. It's similar in the gym in that you kind of set up the environment so that you can learn safely. So we start in the foam pit pretty much for all of our flips. There are some flips that you might start in a different way, but like for a backflip, you would start in the foam pits, which is just a really soft surface. We actually usually have a coach spot you the first time, just so that you don't have to worry about hitting the edge of the foam pit. A lot of like swimming pools now don't allow people to backflip off the diving boards into the water, just because too many people have hit their heads on the edge. And so it's just kind of the idea for them is we just say no, right? You back up. You guys keep hitting your heads on backflips. No more backflips, right? Our goal here is for you to be able to learn the skills that you want to learn and approach them the right way. So you start with a spot. The next step, you might put a mat in the pit so that it's a little more of a stable surface. You're actually landing on something. It's a little higher. And basically you progress up from like the softest thing on the planet to progressively harder, progressively more level. Essentially, you increase the difficulty as your skill increases, and it becomes more and more similar to the flat ground, like backflip goal that you have. For other movements, like for parkour movements, it's the same idea. There's kind of two approaches. If this is a brand new movement for you, you want to find a spot that's a really good area for you to learn it. So usually that means down low, maybe over something soft like grass, or in our case we have a like foam sprung floor with padded obstacles so that you can intro to that. That said, we also have a lot of hard obstacles because you have to know how to progress up to something, because even if you know how to do, let's say, a Kong vault, which is kind of a typical parkour vault, it's like the most iconic one. If you know how to do it over a 3-foot high wall, maybe you go outside and this wall is 4 foot high. Do you still know how to do it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So
maybe not best to try in the most dangerous place. Take it back to the laboratory.
So but also you can learn techniques for how to work up to it. So progression is a huge part of learning parkour, and not just learning parkour, but practicing parkour. So almost like all the things that are difficult for me to do, I didn't just do. You know, I'm not. It's not just you go out there and I push through the fear. No, that's terrible.
Some people do that, and
they usually get
sometimes
hurt.
doesn't end up well.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my students used to, you know, I used to see him like be scared of a movement and build up to power through. And I told him, you know, most successful high level parkour athletes don't go when they're feeling that way. That's a sign that you're maybe not ready for this movement.
Yeah.
Now, that said, there are things that I'm scared of that I choose to do all the time. But I run them through all these factors. I check the environment. I check my skill level. You have to check yourself a lot. I will test that I know how to do it, that I can make the distance, that I have my landing continuum ready for that specific thing, that I have my falling continuum planned. I'll look at all of these factors, and then if I can logically say this is safe for me to do because I have all of this like prerequisite knowledge, then I will try to calm down and do it. But a lot of times it involves a lot of like practice jumps and a lot of you know, preparing any way that you can. The more prepared you are, the better. It seems to come back to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's that metaphor of just running through and looking from all different angles, checking yourself, checking the environment. I mean, that's like great metaphor for anything.
Yeah.
It's like really applicable.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's something that's really fundamental to parkour and kind of unique about it is that you're trying to adapt your movement to the environment. Sorry about that.
That's all good.
But yeah, so it requires a potentially a change in how you move depending on this new wall. If this wall is 4 feet high and you've only Kong vaulted something that's 3 feet high, you can't just do the exact same thing. You have to make a subtle change.
Right.
But you can work up to that with some other techniques, maybe something that's similar to a Kong vault, a prerequisite to a Kong vault, or something like that.
And even like the wall texture is going to come in.
Yeah, for sure.
Is it a painted wall or is it?
That's one of those things that you want to check, right? For sure.
Cool, man. What about some general prehab, rehab, or just foundational exercises for anybody from a parkour perspective? From like, what's some things that you would tell your students? Make sure you do these 3 or 4 or 5 things every day or every other day. Right. Don't leave these things behind. What are they?
So parkour, although a full body workout, often will involve a lot of running and jumping. And so our primary goal is to make sure everybody's legs are happy and healthy. And so one thing that we do after pretty much every class is we stretch out our quadriceps, we stretch out our calf muscles. And the idea is just to make sure that those things aren't getting too tight just because we use them a lot. But overall, like strength and mobility are kind of like hand in hand. If you aren't strong enough to be doing taking the impacts that you're taking or doing the movements that you're doing, it might come back to haunt you. If you don't stretch, if you're not, maybe rolling out your muscles, or if you just don't have the range of motion that you should have to do these things, if it's being pushed, that might come back to haunt you. So it kind of takes some preparedness. It takes some prepping to make sure that your body can do all that you want to do. Now, a lot of that has to do with volume. So, if you're super into any activity, pretty much every sport has some kind of like repetitive movement or some movement that's more common than other movements. That's why you have tennis elbow and golfer's elbow. That's why you have runner's knee and jumper's knee and all these like injury names that are just tied to some sport because it's like, oh, you do this thing a lot, you run a lot, you jump a lot, you swing your arm a lot. So there's a specific injury tied to it, and it's because of that. It's because it's just like high volume. If you keep your movement really diverse and kind of work your whole body, then it kind of lessens that risk. And it just makes your whole body a little happier and healthier. So the thing that happens the most in parkour is running and jumping, but there's also a lot of climbing, and there's a lot of we have a lot of swinging, and so the more we can kind of diversify it, the less that's the risk as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
What are you excited about coming up for this place?
Oh man. Well, right now our classes are pretty full. So I'm excited about opening up more classes and training some of these like up and coming instructors so that we're ready to kind of house more people. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot as well is having some of my possibly having some of my teens and like those other students,
more advanced students
start to maybe help out or be involved in the teaching in some way, because I'm seeing more and more that when you teach, you have to go in depth and you learn more about the movements themselves, and it's really good for your own knowledge and training. And then our community can grow as well. I feel like we're in Rohnert Park. We're not in some big like urban city where there's a ton of people and already a big parkour community. We were the local parkour community, and we started a gym because we were passionate about it. And now everybody who does parkour in Sonoma County goes here. And so to get more coaches, we have to grow from the inside. So these are people that I'm teaching that, but it's also cool because, it's from the ground up. I have influence from the beginning through to the end. So
have you thought of having like a teacher training program, or like a sort of like a leveled system or do you have that?
I do have that. When somebody first starts to be a coach, there's a whole like workbook that they go through with a lot of shadowing classes, and then coaching classes with help, and then coaching classes with supervision. And then each time after class, I have like a meeting with that coach,
Cool.
And give them feedback on their coaching. I'll work with them about their setups and their plan for class. So before class, if they're setting something up, I'll usually say like, okay, so for this age group, I would adjust this and shift this and think about this when you're teaching this movement and stuff like that. Yeah. And, and then, the more, the better and better they get, the more I step away and let them have a little bit of creative freedom and grow on their own.
Your little chickadees.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
That's awesome.
It's pretty cool. And I have been so happy and impressed with, my like students turned coaches.
You give people a responsibility that they're of something they're already proud of, like they're gonna take it and run, in my experience.
Yep. And they always they blow me away. They end up coming up with things and teaching things that I wouldn't think to do because they're a unique individual.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not me.
That's an awesome point. And you said before, like like when you teach a skill, you get to look at it from new angles. And just one thing I wanted that made me think of was you also get to see each person who learns it sometimes has a different access point.
Right.
And so the more people you teach it to, you can put all those in sort of a collection and be like, that's that kind of person again who needs that way that I taught that one person.
Right. This helps that one guy. Like this one cue because this guy's doing that same problem. Like, let's see if that helps.
You collect more of those, and then you can apply that to your own training and be like, that I can feel that restriction that one person has that I see. And like I always try to tell my students to make sure you watch everybody training, because everybody has a little idiosyncrasy or a little flair or whatever it is that's either making them excel or holding them back. And if we can look at each other and understand, he's got that type of thing. Do I have that type of thing, or am I free of that?
Do I want that?
Do I want that, or do I want to get rid of that? Yeah, exactly.
It's like when you look at your parents,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you're like,
totally, and you have to be
you're
honest.
either like, I admire that about my father and my mother, and I want to do that, and you're like, that thing drives me crazy, and I never will do that.
And to realize that, or you might think you never going to do that, and you're like, wait, that's what I do.
But when
like,
you check yourself,
and you need to be like, okay, so I need to address that is like a deep part of me. And can I learn to like love that side of myself, or like can I
work
shift
on
that
like,
a new
what
direction? Like and there's the looking at the environment. That's the same. What risk factors do I have being born the person I am? What all that stuff. What like things are awesome about me and like my genetics. And like you have to be honest with that stuff because
we're all unique.
If you try to hide it, then it'll sneak up on you.
And for movement, I think it's super helpful to video yourself and watch it.
Totally.
Because you might feel like you're doing one thing and then watch it and then see something else.
Right, and it's the same thing right now. It's like I recorded I had an interview when I first got this mic, and I recorded it with my old phone. And I think I didn't have enough storage at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And it hit a certain point, and the audio just went ramp. But the video kept going. It kept taking video. So it looked like it was fine. And so it looked like it was fine. So there's still like a chance.
Yeah.
But that's like I had to kind of chalk it up to like things don't.
Yeah.
I contacted the guy. I'm like, can we do that interview again? Like I lost half of it.
Yeah.
And we talked about such awesome stuff.
Yeah.
And like sometimes things just disappear. Or sometimes you screw up. And one thing coming here taught me, I learned a lot coming here, and I think everybody should, but come check it out. But this idea of like a checklist for a movement, right? And like if you're doing, whatever the movement is, like, chest up, eyes this way, swing your arms this way, and like you have this whole checklist building, right? And every time you do the movement, you get to look back on it and be like, what marks did I get? Check pluses. Which ones did I not get at all? And then honestly looking at it and being like, okay, I left out my jump kind of sucked, but I did this good.
Right.
And then the next time you do it, you do your jump good, and then
something else goes
thing,
away.
Right?
But that's okay because as long as you're not doing the same thing over and over again, making the same mistakes is what you want to avoid, right? Like making mistakes is fine because the mistakes are how you learn.
Yeah. And being honest with them and seeing them, right? And, that whole idea. And then the checklist gets, the more you learn a movement, the checklist actually gets like bigger and bigger, but more checks kind of check themselves automatically, right?
It's natural.
Yeah, and
it's natural.
And you start working on smaller details, and like you do one, and the whole checklist that used to not have checks will fill up with checks, and now you have a much like. Was it a really high jump that time, or was it just like one of my medium jumps? And you get kind of more strict with yourself. And that process is really cool. And Nagin, when he was here, he kind of touched on an idea that I kind of discovered through parkour first, which is make things small and able to do them, and like really like conquerable first, and like. Make sure you can do it small, and then you can do it small and make it dangerous. Or, make the risk factor higher, but keep it small. And like that whole just building of confidence and building of your belief system and your belief in yourself and understanding your limitations, I always found really great. And Nagin with the like tiny versions of movements and like breaking them down and like, okay, what's like if I want to do a front flip, like, okay, I have to learn how to roll. Right. But like, let's roll as tiny as we possibly can first and get really comfy, and then make it a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger. And it's like, it's a biting. How you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah. Well, and the way a lot of people learn things in capoeira is very similar to a parkour mentality. Like, so I talked about how, in here you can learn a flip by adjusting the mats or the environment, and that's a really important tool. But at the same time, we also have this separate skill set of progressing up to a movement. And so, because we have to adapt to our environment, we're constantly having to adjust and progress up to movements in new spaces. And a lot of the traditional capoeira guys can do incredible flips and movements, and they learn it all on hard ground. And in gymnastics, you always do everything straight over the top. I did gymnastics up until I was 17. So I did gymnastics from age 2 to 17. So a huge chunk of my life. And I love the sport.
And perfection's almost like you start with the straight line.
You start with the straight line because if you ever go crooked, you might develop a bad habit.
Right.
How do you work out of that?
Right.
In capoeira and in parkour, you're trying to develop just control of your body, and you might, in order to learn something similar to this movement, the very first baby step of this movement, you might do something that's different, but just in like barely related, you know, like a third cousin.
I almost like think of like a old person learn, or a baby or an old person. Like I have like a fragile body I want to take care of, and like, but if I had to do that crazy thing that he did, it would be like a little just like,
So in gymnastics it's like you do that mat progression that I talked about in the foam pit and then on the mats and stuff like that. In parkour and in capoeira you have this other thing that you can do where you adjust your movement, and then when you get comfy with one you can add, okay, now I'm gonna try this movement which is also similar but adds this and makes it more similar to this end goal that I want. And then you can progress up to things with the idea of landing on your feet the entire time.
Right.
And I think it's a really cool thing, and it's a great being able to look at a problem, break it into a bunch of tiny little pieces, and progress towards that solution is a valuable skill in life.
Totally.
And that's something that
I
get good at.
Capoeira and parkour also maybe like one of the main things I see as a virtue in capoeira is the community and like teamwork, and like that's how like they achieve flips also is like you don't have mats and stuff, so it's like, okay, we're gonna hold you and flip you through this, and you're just gonna get used to that. And I'm learning how to help people by doing that. I'm getting stronger because I'm lifting people, and you can
do partner things where you're like rolling over each other, and
you have mud, and you have
and that's what I was talking
sand.
about.
You have like places that naturally lend themselves to a little more safety, a little more forgiving,
and that's when you're first, like if you didn't have a gym and you wanted to learn a flip, you start by going into water.
Right.
Everybody has access to water. There's pools. There's swimming holes. You want to make sure it's deep.
Now you're getting into Wim Hof training already.
There you go.
You hit all the you do it. Why stop in the winter?
Right. You could combine it all together. But you start into water and progress into like soft sand. There was a teacher at my high school who learned backflips by doing them into waves. So he would face the beach, a wave would come, and he would try a backflip because the water level would be higher behind him. So it was safer, and then he would just move forward and move forward. And it was so cool. Like that's how he learned.
Right.
And then he was able to do a flat ground backflip.
I still haven't done my backflip on a hard surface like this, but I've done it at the beach. I've done it a few times without reaching and touching. And like, it's funny, your mindset gets into that, like you see a hard surface next to a soft surface, and you're like, oh, I could practice right there.
Like, that one's good to jump off of, and that one's good to land on.
Right. So that's, you start looking at your environment different just by learning a new skill. You like start looking at soil types. You start that's like a tracker school thing. It's like any skill you start to learn, if you go in deep enough, it becomes an access point to other skills. You're looking at like soil discovery, and then geology, and you're studying the tides so that you can go out at the right time to do your flips. It's like
well, and one fun thing about just learning anything that involves the environment is there's like interesting things everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, if you learn about plants, then when you go on a hike, it's like a scavenger hunt. You know, everything is more interesting. You're like, oh, what's that plant over there? And like, I wonder if this plant is nearby, because those often grow together. And, you know, and then you're looking for like animal tracks, because you know that certain animals like to eat these things and they're like native to this area. And so it just gives you, it adds more value.
Looking at flow state and run, that's like the same idea. Like talk about like going on a wander through the woods. It's like you don't know, like if you just keep your mind open, it's going to take you in a direction. You're going to discover something. If you're creative, like boredom's a lack of creativity. And if you, every little skill you learn should be adding to your defense against boredom. Right?
Totally. I had a big list of things that was like, if you're ever bored, these are all the things that you like, that you want to be better at, and that you like could put some time into or whatever. And it was like, okay, you know, I think it's easy. Like, it happens to everybody. You know, you get sucked into like your routine, and you know, you're tired, you get a break, and you're like, I don't want to do something that's like hard or that's takes
cool
effort.
To see. Even animals go through routine traps. Like they talk about that with like when an animal walks a trail for long enough, if it's a low animal, eventually it's going to wear down the trail so it can't even see above, and it's fully vulnerable to all predation, right? Because it didn't get creative, and it stayed on the same thing, and that's an environmental factor. Like maybe it's a park and there's people around in these areas, and so it kind of gets confined. And that's the one the owl's going to eat because it got stuck in a routine.
It can't see.
And it can see, right? And like, just breaking out of that is, I guess that's like a huge skill in parkour. And like, I think this idea of prehab and rehab and preparedness, like being prepared for boredom, like you're saying. Like, it's like knowing a feeling as it coming, feeling that's emerging, and knowing kind of what's my list of responses, like you said, jumping at a wall. Do I go, I miss, do I go over? If I miss, do I go back? Do I hang on? Do I let go? And like being able to calculate those fast. That probably makes you a better human in a lot of ways.
And you
not
know,
better than anyone else, but a more able human to help somebody else, or to help yourself.
You're just so one of my favorite things about parkour and capoeira and jiu-jitsu and like all of these things is that they all are fun, they're all like games, and they all make you more capable in general. You're a more capable mover, you're more prepared for an emergency scenario, you're like, it gives you these tools that we're talking about, like tools to you know, break things down into little pieces and progress up to things. It gives you this tool to like explore your environment and interact with it in different ways. But it's all just like, when I'm doing it, I'm not like, how do I become the most prepared person? I'm like, ooh, that looks fun.
What's fun? And
you get fit. Like builds strength and makes your body.
That was a huge realization for me over the last couple years. I went to this teaching kids workshop. It was like how to teach kids capoeira. It's this kind of program run by Mestre Ferradora. But it's like, we forget how easy an access point fun is, and that like it doesn't take an insane amount of creativity to make a game out of something. It's the same as kind of making a podcast or making a post. Like sometimes we like overthink, and we like, you know, I was nervous to do these, and I still kind of am like, this is a little like, it's unfamiliar to me, and I'm gonna have to push into it. But it's like, go out and do it.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
and
It's the best way to get better at something.
Right.
Is to do it.
Yeah.
To practice.
And don't beat myself up or like what, like, because ultimately just like making the thing or going for a run or whatever, it's going to change your perspective.
Yeah.
Like the easiest way to change perspective is like move and go.
Yeah.
Like actually go change it. Like
Yeah.
physically.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the Adventure Time quote. Sucking at something's the first step to being sort of good at something.
Right.
It's like,
And that's humility too. Like
yeah.
the idea of humility.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So a game, making a kid's game, like it should be, like, the kids don't care what, like, ultimately if is it fun or like what, like that part of the game doesn't make sense. It's like, that's the shark and then there's a zombie,
right,
and you're like, and we're playing shark and zombie, and you're like, okay, like what are the rules of shark and zombie?
Sharks and zombies are both pretty cool.
Right. And you might like you're trying to think of what to teach for class, and you have like a game idea, and it's like we hold ourselves back out of like fear of judgment, even from like kids,
right?
And you're like,
or it's like fear of failure.
Yeah, right.
Like,
and if it fails, like great, move on. It's like,
what if the parents are watching? And like this game doesn't
that
go
one
how
kid
I
makes
think
fun of
it
me.
Might go. Yeah. Jimmy is always kind of harsh. This game's boring. You're boring, Jimmy.
Yeah, for real. And so it's, he connects a lot of song to games and then to movement.
That's cool, yeah.
And it's like,
it's one thing that Capoeira has that's
and it's
kind of unique to a lot of these other things, is it also incorporates music and dance,
right?
And all like movement and acrobatics and martial arts.
And so you just make a unique. You want them to lift. You're doing like crab walk or whatever, and you want them to like kick their leg up. Like it can be like part of a song where it's like, and the like frog kicks away the thing, and it's like frogs don't do like one leg at a time. It's like, who cares? The frog kicks the thing and the legs up,
right?
Like, and just adding a story, adding like an element, they're gonna remember it a little bit better, and it's just like, and adding that to being a parent, adding that to just like my life. It's like life can be fun, like all of life can be fun, like, and we like have expectations of ourselves or of other people that pull us down or pull us all in circles, and we're worried about working our job and paying our bills, of course, but like, are you like, the day is gonna go by, you're gonna get older, check, like it's another checklist thing. It's like, did I have fun? Like, and it's like, let's get to the end of life with a bunch of days where we were like, hell yeah. Right. Sucked a little, but hell yeah.
Yeah, you gotta go after some things that you enjoy.
Right.
And hopefully those things are like good for you. Like they should be good for you.
Right.
Otherwise you're not gonna enjoy them in the long run.
Eventually, yeah. Well, sweet, Christian.
That was fun.
Shdwbx podcast. Thank you, Shdwboxers.
Yeah.
Come check out Flying Frog Studio. And come jump around with this guy.
Yeah, come learn some parkour.
Yep.
Learn some flips.
Yep.
We got
stuff.
all kinds of stuff.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
Good looking better now.